Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When rancher Colt Maddox found strangers trespassing on his land, he thought it was just a mistake. He was wrong. What followed was a war between one man and a power-hungry HOA. Cameras, chains, stolen cattle, and courtroom showdowns. This wasn't just a land dispute. It was war. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments and hit like if you love stories where justice finally wins. Let's ride. I'd barely made it past the cattle guard when I saw the trucks. 3 of them, late model pickups with clean paint jobs and magnetic logos slapped on the doors. Aspen Ridge Creek HOA Compliance Division. The words meant nothing to me, except as a red flag. I rolled to a stop just outside my front gate. It was wide open, which already pissed me off. I keep it shut for a reason. The gate sits at the edge of my 1,200-acre ranch outside Cody, Wyoming. Private property clearly marked, cameras everywhere, and yet here they were, uninvited. One guy in a polo shirt and skinny jeans was walking the length of my equipment shed with a laser rangefinder, squinting up at the roofline. Another, some nervous-looking kid with a clipboard, was jotting things down while snapping photos of my truck, my trailer, even my cattle pens. A third, woman in a blazer like she'd gotten lost on her way to a real estate seminar, was squatting next to the irrigation valve near my water tanks, tapping something into her tablet. I stepped out of my Ford, slow and calm. Wore my hat low, sunglasses on, boots dusty from the feed store in Cheyenne. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't need to. Mind telling me who the hell you are and why you're trespassing on my land? Blazer woman stood up like she'd just been caught keying a car. Sir, we're conducting a compliance survey in accordance with the bylaws of Aspen Ridge Creek Homeowners Association. Your structures appear to exceed height limitations as per Section 4B. I blinked at her, then laughed. I'm not part of any HOA, I said flatly. This ranch ain't inside your boundaries, never has been. Now I suggest you get back in those trucks before you find out what a trespass charge looks like in Park County. Clipboard kid muttered something about visual annexation rights, and polo shirt stepped toward me, hands up like I was holding a rifle. You're adjacent to our subdivision, sir. Your property visually impacts the cohesion of our community aesthetic. You're required to comply with basic standards. That one got a real laugh out of me. Visually impacts? Is that legalese for we don't like the look of your barn? I pulled out my phone and tapped the speed dial for Sheriff Langdon. He picked up on the second ring. Langdon. Colt? Got 3 HOA bozos inside my gate measuring my barn and photographing my cows. Says I'm visually non-compliant. You want to send someone before I decide to demonstrate what actual non-compliance looks like? He chuckled. On the way. 15 minutes later, a county cruiser pulled up, dust cloud trailing behind it. Deputy Redmond climbed out, hand on his belt, giving the HOA crew the kind of look he usually reserved for meth heads with garden tools. I handed him a folder, printed maps, deed records, plat surveys. Everything showing my land was wholly outside Aspen Ridge Creek's jurisdiction. Redmond flipped through it and nodded. That's what I thought. Folks, you're trespassing. This here's not your territory. Polo shirt started to argue, but blazer woman put a hand on his arm. Let's go, she snapped. This isn't worth another fine. They packed up quick, engines revving as they peeled out down my gravel road like they'd just seen a ghost. Redmond turned to me. You good? For now, I said. But that wasn't a one-off. That was an opener. He gave me a half smile. Yeah, you poked the bear. I nodded slowly. No, the bear wandered onto my land. By sundown, I'd reviewed every camera feed and replaced the lock on the gate. I added 2 more trail cams facing the tree line and programmed alerts to ping my phone if anyone so much as sneezed near the fence. I don't like repeating myself, and I sure as hell don't like warning shots. Next time, they'd get a citation. Or worse. I don't sleep late. The ranch doesn't allow it. Livestock don't give a damn what time you went to bed. So I was up before sunrise, sipping coffee on the porch, watching a jackrabbit hop across the far fence line when I noticed something wrong. The gate. It was closed, but not my doing. I hadn't shut it last night, and when I zoomed in on the feed from the driveway camera, my jaw clenched. 2 heavy-duty chains looped tight across the entrance, with bright yellow padlocks shining in the dawn light, and taped right to the center. A single laminated sheet with big bold letters. Notice of closure. Non-compliance with HOA mandate. Access suspended until registration is complete. They had the audacity to sign it. Aspen Ridge Creek Compliance Division. I didn't bother finishing the coffee, grabbed my bolt cutters, hopped in the truck, and drove the 100 yards to the gate. Took me all of 60 seconds to clip through both locks. Chains clattered to the ground. I saved the sign, took a picture of it next to my parcel number marker, then tossed the whole mess in the bed of my truck. They were testing me, seeing how far they could push before I snapped. I spent the next few hours locking down every entrance. Posted private land, no trespassing, trespassers will be prosecuted signs on every fence post, set up a few more no-flash trail cameras, added a live motion sensor to the north gate, and, just for flavor, hung one of my old military shooting. Targets on the post facing the road, riddled with 5.56 holes from when I'd taught my nephew how to fire prone. Let them read between the lines. Around 10 the next morning, they escalated. 2 black and whites pulled up, lights spinning, kicking up dust as they came down the drive. I stepped out of the workshop, wiping my hands, and saw 3 officers climb out, hands resting on their sidearms but not drawn. I recognized Deputy Redmond, but the other 2 were county officers I hadn't met. "Mr. Maddox," Redmond said carefully, "we received a report of a man matching your description brandishing a weapon and threatening members of the Aspen Ridge Creek community." I raised an eyebrow. Did the report also mention that said members were trespassing, chaining gates, vandalizing signage? Redmond didn't smile, but I saw the twitch at the corner of his mouth. "Got anything to show us?" "You bet." We stepped into my office. I'd already pulled the footage from the trail cams onto a monitor. 3 clips. First, a figure climbing the outer fence with bolt cutters. Second, someone in a windbreaker unspooling chain around my gate. Third, a grainy night image of a car idling by the water tower, plates visible. I let the footage speak for itself. One of the other officers leaned forward. "That's HOA?" "Sure looks like it," I said. "Unless someone else decided to impersonate their little compliance crew." I handed them the laminated notice and both padlocks, bagged and tagged with the date and time I found them. "Jesus," Redmond muttered. "She really thinks she runs the county." "She's about to learn otherwise," I replied, keeping my tone even. "You've got video of criminal trespass, destruction of property, and false reporting. I'm pressing charges." One of the officers nodded. "We'll open the case today. You'll get an incident number within the hour." They left professionally, but I could tell their patience with HOA drama was wearing thin. That evening, as the sun dropped low behind the ridge, I got a call from a rancher across the valley. Said some woman in a tan Subaru stopped by his fence, asking how long I'd lived here and whether I was friendly with Aspen Ridge. When he told her I was Navy and didn't take to strangers asking about my property, she bolted. I knew who it was. Karen hadn't shown her face yet, but her fingerprints were all over this. I sent a packet of evidence to my attorney, flagged everything for official filing, and then sat on the porch again, this time with bourbon, not coffee. The only thing worse than a HOA president with delusions of grandeur is one who doesn't realize she's standing on someone else's land when she starts issuing orders. The letter arrived 2 days later, hand-delivered by a courier wearing khakis and a hopeful smile that disappeared the second he saw my expression. It came in a thick envelope, embossed with the official-looking seal of the Aspen Ridge Creek Homeowners Association Legal Counsel, addressed to Colton Maddox, unincorporated adjacent resident. That was already enough to make me snort. Inside was a 4-page document dressed up in legalese but stripped bare. It said this: "Let's not fight. Join the HOA. Pay a one-time adjustment fee of $1,500. Comply voluntarily with the Architectural Code. And in return, we'll expunge all previous misunderstandings." I stared at it for a good 30 seconds before walking it straight to my wood-burning stove, tossing it in, and watching it curl into black ash. Then I called my attorney. Barry Ortega's an old friend from my time stationed in San Diego. Now he runs a tight legal operation out of Casper and keeps a reserved file drawer labeled Maddox versus the World. I told him everything: the trespassing, the chain incident, the bogus police call, and now this extortion-flavored offer. His voice went flat. "This is coercion. We're filing suit." We didn't waste time. By that afternoon, Barry had filed civil charges in the district court: unlawful trespass, defamation, attempted extortion, false police reporting, and willful interference with private property. He included photos, camera footage, sworn statements, and a formal demand for damages, $85,000 plus legal fees. I made sure the suit was delivered with the same courier service they used. Symmetry matters. The next morning, I got a call from a different number. A woman, mid-40s by the sound of it, clipped and overly polite. Mr. Maddox, I represent Ms. Karen Trujillo, president of the Aspen Ridge Creek HOA. We understand you've had concerns and would be open to a discussion of a cooperative resolution. Sure, I said, as long as it ends with your client in court. There was a pause. Then, perhaps we should take a more amicable path. Ms. Trujillo is willing to meet personally. She feels this entire situation stems from confusion about boundary maps. I almost laughed out loud. There's no confusion, I said. There's only arrogance. She thinks proximity equals jurisdiction. She's about to learn otherwise. I hung up and poured another coffee. Later that week, a new wrinkle. Someone had spray-painted HOA scum get out on one of the perimeter boards of the subdivision itself. I saw the photo on the local Facebook group when someone tried to blame me. Of course. I screen captured the post, flagged it for Barry, and posted a reply. Sorry, folks. I was busy repairing fences and defending my property from real vandalism. If I had something to say to the HOA, I wouldn't need spray paint to do it. The comments lit up. Apparently, I wasn't the only one they'd tried to push around. By Friday, I noticed something strange. One of the HOA board members, a guy named Vince who ran a lawn care business, drove past my outer fence 3 times in one day. Real slow. Same truck, same logo. I stood out near the gate the 3rd time, arms crossed. He didn't even wave, just floored it back toward Aspen Ridge. That night, I reinforced the gate posts with fresh concrete and double-checked my rifle locker. These people were done playing nice. Fine by me. They crossed a line. Up until that point, most of it had been theater. Infuriating, sure, but it still followed a twisted logic, paperwork, intimidation, bureaucratic nonsense. But then they made it personal. They made it criminal. It started with a letter, not a legal one this time, just a thick, glossy HOA bulletin that somehow found its way into my mailbox. It looked innocent enough. Special community meeting, emergency vote regarding adjacent property incorporation. And in small print, next to asterisks and qualifiers, a phrase that made me grind my molars. We propose the annexation of visually and structurally adjacent land into the HOA boundary to preserve neighborhood integrity. They were voting to absorb me, like I was some overgrown bush on the edge of their garden. That night, I scanned the minutes from the HOA site. They'd held a private meeting and passed a motion to formalize expectations of adjacent landowners, citing precedent and ongoing visual disturbance. In other words, I existed, and that bothered them. 2 days later, the letter arrived, a printed notice, not from a court, not from the county, but from Aspen Ridge Creek HOA Enforcement Committee, demanding that I vacate all non-compliant structures and remove livestock until a compliance plan is submitted. It ended with a line that would have been hilarious if it weren't so unhinged. Failure to comply may result in community-based remedies and administrative enforcement. I called Barry. They've lost their minds, I said. They're trying to retroactively write jurisdiction into existence, he muttered. This isn't just civil anymore. They're laying the groundwork to fabricate authority. I didn't laugh this time, because what happened next wasn't funny. That same night, around 3 a.m, my phone pinged with a motion alert from the north gate. I checked the live feed, expecting a deer or maybe a loose cow. What I saw made my blood run cold. 2 men in hoodies, faces covered, crouching near the fence line, bolt cutters in hand. One of them clipped through the wire mesh while the other watched the road. 10 seconds later, they ducked through. I grabbed my rifle, threw on boots, and made it to the ATV in record time. But by the time I reached the breach, they were gone. Gone. And so was one of my calves. I called the sheriff immediately. Langdon himself came out with 2 deputies and a spotlight team. We found hoofprints leading toward the hills and a set of tire tracks at a dirt service road that connected to a property just past the Aspen Ridge boundary. The calf had a GPS tag. I pulled the app, tracked it in real time, and watched the blinking dot settle right on the driveway of Vince Delgado, the same board member who'd been circling my fence last week. Langdon looked at me. "You sure this is the one?" "Positive," I said. He nodded, made the call, and within 20 minutes, they had a warrant to search the Delgado property. The calf was in a pen behind his house. Still alive, still tagged. Vince stood there in his sweatpants trying to talk his way out of it, blaming a mistaken drop-off and claiming he found it wandering. Langdon didn't buy it. Vince was cuffed, read his rights, and placed in the back of the cruiser. His wife came out yelling until the deputies pointed out the bolt cutters sitting by their shed, and then Vince cracked. I watched from the fence line as he broke down, said he was pressured by Karen, that she'd told him the land would be theirs soon anyway, and he was just taking preemptive action. Langdon stared at him like he was an alien. "She told you to rustle livestock? You realize that's a felony, right?" Vince nodded like a kid caught stealing candy. Back at the ranch, I sent Barry everything: video, GPS log, arrest report, even a copy of the ridiculous eviction notice. He didn't say much on the phone, but his email subject line read, "This just went nuclear. The courthouse was packed. Word had spread fast." The local paper had already run a front-page story. Rancher presses charges after HOA board member caught in livestock theft. The subheading read, "Community president named in criminal conspiracy." There was even a blurry photo of Vince being loaded into the cruiser, eyes wide and mouth open like a stunned mule. Barry and I walked into the courtroom with a thick binder of evidence: security footage, GPS logs, chain of custody forms, witness statements, and the HOA's own asinine printed threats. The clerk raised an eyebrow when we dropped it on the bench. It thudded like a brick. Karen wasn't there that morning. Her attorney stood in for her, stiff and pale. Vince, however, was present, sitting with his own lawyer, who looked like he was trying to disappear into his tie. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Alvarez, took one look at the preliminary evidence and set a fast track for the hearing. The civil case against the HOA and the criminal complaint against Vince were now formally linked. The phrase she used was potentially organized and malicious campaign of extrajudicial enforcement. Barry leaned over and whispered, "That's judge speak for someone's going to prison." Over the next week, it got uglier. Vince took a deal. Classic play, lesser charges in exchange for testimony. He gave a full recorded deposition, naming Karen as the one who orchestrated the boundary absorption, encouraged surveillance on my property, and greenlit retrieval of stray livestock to prove a point. She'd actually used that phrase, to prove a point. By day 3 of hearings, we introduced audio from a voicemail Karen had accidentally left on someone's answering machine, meant for another board member. In it, she laughed about showing that Navy freak who's boss and called my livestock property clutter. The room went dead silent when we played it. Even her attorney looked like he wanted to walk out. By the end of the week, Judge Alvarez issued a preliminary ruling in my civil case. The HOA was liable for damages stemming from trespass, defamation, property interference, and malicious conduct. They were ordered to pay a total of $215,000, plus legal fees, with further penalties to be determined at the close of the criminal proceedings. But that wasn't the finish line. The sheriff's department, using Vince's deposition, obtained a new warrant, this time for Karen's house and her home office. Inside, they found what Barry would later call a damn treasure chest of arrogance. Personal notes detailing territorial encroachment strategies, HOA maps with my parcel outlined in red ink and labeled Target Zone. And this one was the kicker: an unsigned memo draft titled Operational Assimilation Plan. It read like a corporate hostile takeover, but of my ranch. Karen was arrested that Friday in front of her house, wearing a pink fleece and absolutely no idea what was coming. I didn't see it live, but a neighbor filmed it from their porch and sent it to Barry. We watched it together on his laptop, Karen protesting, pointing at the badge, screeching that she was the community president, as if that title granted immunity from felony conspiracy. The officer cuffing her didn't even flinch. "Ma'am, you are under arrest for criminal conspiracy, falsifying jurisdictional documents, and incitement to commit theft. You have the right to remain silent." She didn't use it. Karen's arrest should have been the end of it. But parasites don't die easy. They squirm. 3 days after she was booked, a hastily printed bulletin appeared on every HOA mailbox in Aspen Ridge Creek, signed by the remaining board members. It was a masterpiece of desperation. Our beloved president has been wrongfully accused. In her absence, the HOA will continue operations to ensure community safety and harmony. They used words like misunderstanding, overreach, and temporary irregularities. I called it what it was: damage control written in crayon. But they weren't just printing leaflets. Behind the scenes, they were lawyering up fast. Turns out, the HOA had a general counsel on retainer, a firm in Denver used to fighting off slip-and-fall lawsuits and enforcing architectural codes, not defending their board from conspiracy and livestock theft charges. Barry dug into their filings. The HOA's official position now? That the board had acted independently, and Karen had exceeded her mandate without knowledge or consent of the membership. A clear attempt to isolate her and save the organization. It wasn't going to work, especially not after the local news ran a 3-part special titled Rancher vs. HOA When Private Property Fights Back. I wasn't looking for attention. Hell, I hadn't even agreed to be interviewed. But someone leaked enough court material that the press had a field day. People started talking, not just neighbors, ranchers from all over the county. Some of them called me personally, shared stories of pushy associations trying to enforce rules on land they didn't own. One guy in Fremont County had fought off a similar land grab 10 years ago. Another from Cody said he'd been fined for unauthorized fencing on his own acreage, outside the HOA limits. This wasn't just my fight anymore, it was a damn trend. Meanwhile, the HOA tried a last-ditch move. They filed a counterclaim in civil court, alleging that my refusal to cooperate with community guidelines had created instability, reputational harm, and public outrage that endangered property values. Barry didn't even blink. "This is pure theater," he said, "and we'll treat it like one." He filed a motion to dismiss and to sanction. Within the week, the judge not only threw out the counterclaim, but issued a stern reprimand to the HOA's counsel for abuse of process, an attempt to obfuscate pending criminal matters. I could practically hear Barry smiling through the phone. But just when I thought the rest of the board might slink off into the shadows, boom! Another escalation. Someone, I still don't know who, sent an anonymous complaint to the Wyoming Department of Agriculture. Claimed I was illegally operating a livestock facility without proper environmental controls and threatening public water runoff. It was laughable, until 2 state inspectors showed up at my gate. They were polite, hats in hand, badges visible, very aware they were walking into a situation, but still had to conduct an inspection due to multiple formal complaints. I let them in, walked them through everything. Grazing records, water runoff data, septic systems, fencing zones. I even showed them the ranch's environmental clearance reports, updated just last quarter. They left with a stack of copies and an apology. One of them, a younger guy named Brett, muttered on his way out, "This smells political." "You think," I said, and shut the gate behind him. I called Barry again. He sighed. "They're reaching. They know they've lost, and now it's just about dragging you through the mud to soften the blow." "Fine," I said. "Then we'll make the mud stick to them." I didn't go looking for a soapbox, but they shoved one under me and dared me not to stand on it. 2 days after the bogus state inspection, a segment ran on regional TV, HOA Overreach, when homeowner associations go too far. They used footage of Karen being arrested and cut to a voiceover calling in a cautionary tale of unchecked community. Power. They'd reached out to me for comment. I declined. Didn't matter. They showed drone footage of my ranch, highlighted my status as a veteran, and ended the piece with a slow zoom on the sign at my gate. Private land. Trespassers will be prosecuted. Suddenly, I was a symbol. People started showing up. First, it was a local rancher who brought me a case of beer and said, "Hell yeah." Then a group of veterans who'd been watching the case. One of them told me, "You're fighting our fight too." Even a damn state senator from Laramie dropped by, shook my hand, and said she was deeply concerned about HOA overreach statewide. I didn't ask for a parade. I asked for peace. Meanwhile, HOA Aspen Ridge Creek was on fire from the inside. Karen's arrest and the loss of 2 board members to resignation had sparked a chain reaction. Half the dues-paying residents were now demanding transparency, financial audits, and in some cases, refunds. There were rumors of a class action brewing, not from me, but from within. I wasn't surprised. Barry and I kept the legal front steady. He filed motions to freeze HOA assets related to my case, subpoenaed internal communications, and requested full disclosure of all surveillance actions ordered by the board. And then came the motherlode. A paralegal from the HOA's law firm leaked an internal memo. Accidentally or on purpose, we still don't know, but the file landed in Barry's inbox like a meteor. It was a PDF marked confidential strategy, CRC, and dated 2 weeks before the calf theft. Inside, minutes from a private HOA session where Karen and 3 other board members discussed active pressure tactics against my ranch. They talked about cutting off visual access, imposing soft restrictions through signage, and partnering with municipal code enforcement for leverage. One quote stood out: "He may own the land, but we control perception." That was their plan. To manufacture enough doubt, enough optics, that someone at the state or county level would cave and pressure me to fold. I sent the file straight to Barry, and by that evening, it was in the hands of the Wyoming State Attorney General's office. The next day, we got confirmation the AG had opened a formal investigation into HOA Aspen Ridge Creek for coordinated abuse of authority, harassment, and civil conspiracy. Barry exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for months. "This is how you kill the beast," he said, "with its own guts." Meanwhile, I put up a new sign at the north gate: "Private Ranch. Not for sale, not for vote, not yours." People kept stopping to take pictures. I didn't smile, but damn if it didn't feel good. The letterhead said Office of the Wyoming Attorney General in all caps. Inside was a request, no, a summons, asking me to appear for a formal deposition as part of the investigation into Aspen Ridge Creek HOA. Barry and I drove down to Cheyenne together. He wore a blue tie and that quiet grin he only puts on when he smells blood. The deposition took 4 hours. They asked everything. Every letter, every incident, every video, every conversation. I laid it out clean. The trespassing, the fake citations, the chained gates, the stolen calf, the threats, the surveillance, and the so-called operational assimilation plan. The assistant AG took notes like she was transcribing a novel. When we were done, she looked me straight in the eye and said, "You've been more than patient, Mr. Maddox. This is not just a civil violation. This is criminal fraud, conspiracy, and abuse of regulatory frameworks." Barry's smile didn't fade for the rest of the drive back. By the time we got home, the impact was already rumbling. The AG's office issued subpoenas to all remaining HOA board members. One of them, the treasurer, a guy named Ed Milstein, resigned the next morning and turned over a hard drive full of internal files. He didn't want to go down with the ship. Within 72 hours, Aspen Ridge Creek HOA was put under state injunction. All operations suspended, finances frozen, board members legally prohibited from issuing further directives. The community was effectively headless. But Karen wasn't done. From county jail, she filed a request for house arrest pending trial, citing her critical role in coordinating community functions. The judge rejected it so fast the denial letter was time-stamped before the request email finished printing. She also tried to negotiate, sent a message through her new attorney asking if I'd consider a settlement to restore peace and move forward in good faith. I gave Barry one answer: no deal. She went quiet after that. And then, late one evening, a black SUV pulled up just outside my property line. I watched from the porch. Out stepped Karen, flanked by 2 marshals. She didn't try to cross the gate, just stood there, arms cuffed in front, chin high like she still ran the world. "Mr. Maddox," one of the marshals called out. "Ms. Trujillo has a court-approved right to make a final statement before full indictment." I stepped down, walked to the gate, leaned on the post. Karen's voice cracked just once. "I never meant for this to happen." "You meant all of it," I said. "You just didn't expect someone to fight back." The marshal nodded, and they led her back into the SUV. No shouting, no drama, just steel in the air. The next morning, the Wyoming Attorney General filed formal criminal charges against Aspen Ridge Creek HOA as a corporate entity, a rare move, reserved for entities accused of coordinated systemic abuse. Barry called it a death sentence. I just nodded. I wasn't celebrating yet. But the end was in sight. The trial began on a Monday. Snow was falling light outside, thin flakes dancing in slow spirals over the courthouse steps in Cheyenne. Inside, the temperature was another matter entirely. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, state officials, even ranchers I didn't know, leaning forward like it was the Super Bowl. The case was officially titled State of Wyoming versus Aspen Ridge Creek HOA et al. Karen Trujillo was the lead defendant. Vince took the stand first, his plea deal contingent on full cooperation. He testified for 4 hours straight, voice steady, detail after brutal detail. He told the jury everything: how the board had discussed territorial expansion, how Karen had given verbal go-ahead to cut fences, remove livestock, fabricate complaints. When asked why he'd gone along with it, he paused, swallowed, and said, "Because we thought we were untouchable." Then came the exhibits. Barry had built a wall of evidence that could have held back a flood, video of unauthorized inspections, audio recordings of Karen joking about absorbing outliers, email chains with subject lines like "compliance by pressure," the operational memo, the fake zoning maps, the photos of the broken gate and the stolen calf standing in someone else's yard. Then, my turn. I took the stand, swore in, looked straight at that jury. I didn't give them a speech. I gave them the truth, told them what happened, in plain words. The trespasses, the threats, the tactics. The feeling of coming home and finding strangers measuring my damn barn, of getting slapped with false accusations, of watching a herd scatter in the dark because someone cut the perimeter wire. Told them I wasn't just fighting for my land. I was fighting because if this kind of rot was allowed to spread, no one was safe. Barry smiled from the table. Karen's attorney tried to poke holes, called me combative, aggressive, non-cooperative. I stayed calm. Just told him, you try raising livestock on 1,200 acres and not getting aggressive when someone steals from you. The courtroom chuckled. Even the judge cracked a smirk. When closing arguments hit, Barry didn't posture. He didn't perform. He just turned to the jury and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about something older than bylaws or fences. It's about what's right. You've seen the videos, you've read the documents, you've heard the admissions. If that's not conspiracy, if that's not criminal misuse of authority, then we no longer have a line between law and intimidation." Deliberation took 5 hours. Guilty on all counts. Karen was convicted of conspiracy to commit fraud, criminal harassment, abuse of power, and incitement to trespass. The HOA as a corporate entity was found guilty of systemic overreach, unlawful enforcement, and organized misconduct. The judge didn't hold back. Karen got 10 years in prison. No probation, no delay. You weaponized a position of trust, the judge said. You turned a community mechanism into a personal empire, and when challenged, you chose tyranny. The remaining board members took plea deals and walked out with felony records and financial ruin. The HOA itself? Dissolved, charter revoked, assets seized and redistributed to pay damages. My civil judgment stood, and then some. The final tally crossed $300,000, all to be paid to me as restitution. I didn't celebrate. I just stood in the hallway afterward, hands in my coat pockets, and watched the wind pull snow off the trees. Barry clapped me on the shoulder. "Justice delivered," he said. "Damn right," I answered. Spring came late that year, but it came strong. Snow melted off the North Ridge in long silver veins. The creeks ran full again, calves stumbled through mud with wide eyes, and the fences held, reinforced twice over, with new steel posts and cameras every 100 feet. I didn't install them because I was scared. I installed them because I'd earned peace, and I intended to keep it. The HOA sign at the edge of town was gone, just a rusted pole now, leaning like a drunk after last call. A few of the houses up there still had the old plaques, but most had taken them down quietly, like it was something shameful. I didn't blame them. The residents weren't the enemy. They'd been dragged into something rotten by someone who thought a title was a crown. Karen's name never came up anymore, not out loud. Last I heard, she'd been transferred to a facility downstate. Minimum security, but still prison. 10 years. Some folks said it was harsh. I said it was fair. Vince moved away. Sent me a letter, said he was sorry, that he hoped to start fresh. I didn't reply. Some doors don't open twice. As for me, I went back to work. There were sheds to repaint, fence lines to patrol, a stubborn bull named Wyatt who kept testing the eastern boundary like it was a joke. I gave him a stern talking to and an extra scoop of feed. We understood each other. The payout from the judgment helped, sure. But what mattered more was something harder to measure. Nobody questioned my land anymore. No strangers at the gate. No fake citations. No boards or councils or smug letters signed in cursive trying to tell me how to live on soil I paid for with every dollar and drop of sweat I ever had. One morning, I installed a new plaque next to my front gate, cast iron, heavy. It read, "Private land, independent, unincorporated, unyielding." Below that, smaller, Colt Maddox Ranch, Anti-17, home defended. I stood back, took a breath, and looked out over 1,200 acres of quiet. Not a damn thing moved, just how I liked it.